I'm Marianne Herzog, and I would like to tell you something about trauma and its impact on daily school life. We do a project about it, an Erasmus Plus project, and this is a very important topic for us. In order that we are better prepared for challenging situations at school. These are the topics: the psychological trauma, transferences, and resilience. Trauma pedagogy is a different thing than trauma out of the perspective of psychiatrists and psychologists. As a trauma pedagogist, we consider that the soul is vulnerable, that children and adults can be traumatized, but it is not a diagnosis. And we care about safe places, we care about that children feel in a safe place. Yeah, but there is no diagnosis. The psychological trauma. What is a trauma? A trauma is the result of an overwhelming amount of stress that exceeds one's ability to cope or integrate the emotions involved with the experience. That means a person can cope with a certain amount of stress. But if the problem is bigger than the possibility to cope with, there is the trauma. And sometimes somebody looks like he can cope with a lot of stress, but there is some little amount more and it doesn't work anymore. So it's very difficult to say if it is a trauma, a situation which can traumatize people or not. It is very difficult. Enlightenment is something we have in our minds. It's a very important thing. And people of the Enlightenment, they told us that cogito ergo sum. That means that everything we do is because we want to do it. But nowadays, we have functional brain imaging, and that leads to new knowledge. And this new knowledge is very important for the daily school life. It is important for the knowledge about trauma. We know nowadays that most of the behaviors are regulated by rationality, except in experiences of profound threat. They lead to behaviors which cannot be voluntarily controlled, and this is not caused by illness, rather it is a survival mechanism, a very helpful survival mechanism. So this is how it works in a simple way. So we have the cerebral cortex, and here it is stored what we learn, mathematics, vocabulary. It is where it is the place where we decide what we want to do. So this part of the brain can be influenced. But deep in our brain, we have a part called so-called amygdala. And in this amygdala, we have memories of early childhood, even from the time of pregnancy, and even the knowledge of our ancestors. And this part of the brain can't be changed voluntarily. So in case of threat, the amygdala, which knows what is dangerous and what is not dangerous, provoke neurobiological reactions. That means that there are hormones, endocrinal effects, and that is a very fast kind of reactions. And because it is so fast, it is very helpful. Because sometimes we have to react very, very fast. And if the cerebral cortex would have been involved, it would be too slow. Now I would like to tell you more about it with objects, because I think when you are under pressure, under stress, it is very difficult to remind all those things if you have it in a theoretical way in your mind. Now I would like to explain you all those things with objects. Under stress and under pressure, it's much easier to remind of those things, of those reactions, if we can remember objects. This is a throne. That means who is sitting on the throne is ruling. That's the government. This is the cerebral cortex. And if it is on the throne, everything is okay. We have students, they are listening to teachers, they are dealing well with mathematics, they are friendly towards other students, so everything is okay. We can be very happy having students with cerebral cortex on the throne. Here, this is the amygdala. Of course, it's inside the brain, but to show it better, it's outside. The amygdala is checking, is controlling if ever there is danger. If there is danger, there is I have here a little bell. This bell rings. These are the hormones, and the hormones, they tell a little part in the brain, the limbic system, that it has to be aware of the danger. This is the limbic part of the brain. Now, if it is a danger, the bell is ringing, the little saurian is awake, it changes. Now, the saurian is on the throne. That means he has taken over the government. That can be very, very helpful. For instance, we are on the road. There is a car coming, and it is a very dangerous situation. So the cerebral cortex would take too much time to think over, to perhaps to think about the price of the car or the color, if it is nice or not. It would cause deadly delay. But the saurian is very, very fast. The saurian has not many reactions, possible reactions, but it's enough. He can fight, fly, or freeze. So 3 things: fight, flight, freeze. And when the car comes, perhaps we have the chance to freeze, so we stand there, we don't move anymore, and the car goes by. Or we can jump and we can escape. We won't fight against the car. It knows that it is not a good solution. When the danger is over, so the bells doesn't ring anymore, so the cerebral cortex comes back on the throne. The cerebral cortex is like working in a library. That means when it is on the throne, it remembers everything and it writes it down in books and puts the books on the bookshelf, and if ever something similar happens, it can have a look and see, oh yeah, exactly, 2 years ago it was the same situation. Oh yeah. But the saurian has nothing to do with a person working in a library. It doesn't write anything. It doesn't put anything in books. The memories, when the saurian is ruling, is not put together. There are fragments. There are fragments flying around. And if the story was a long story of violation, of neglect, for instance, it can't put together to a whole story. And these fragments are touching the amygdala when the cerebral cortex is on the throne. So imagine such a fragment is flying by and it touches the amygdala. The amygdala, because it can't read in the books, it thinks that it is a big threat. At the moment, it doesn't recognize that it is a fragment of a danger in the past. So the fragment touches the amygdala, and we have the same situation as if it is a real danger. So the bells ring, the saurian waking up, and the saurian takes over the government. And very often we have students like that in our school, in our classroom. Students, they can't listen anymore to your words. These students, they are perhaps very aggressive, or they are in a freeze state, or they are even on the flight. So this is a very, very difficult situation for everybody to cope. And we have to be careful that we don't have our saurian on the throne too, because at the end it could be really an assembly of many saurians on thrones in the classroom. Now, with this saurian, in this state, we can't really talk to students anymore because they don't understand. They have fight, flight, and freeze possibilities, but they don't understand. But nevertheless, we have to have the cortex again on the throne. What shall we do? There is one possibility. The best possibility is to give a lot of safety. But it's too late if we have the saurian on the throne. So it's much better to give, during this state, give here a lot of safety, and to be careful to give enough safety and to not provoke a situation which is really insecure. Safety helps best that the amygdala is not as sensitive as it would be without the, enough safety. And safety is a main topic with traumatized students. Safety is everywhere. You see, it is made out of paper. That means we have to install safety every day, every hour. We can't have it done for one time, so they need safety. And there are so many good ideas how you can create safety. We will have a look at another point at this question of safety. Yeah, so we know that the cerebral cortex has nothing to do, there is no communication between the cerebral cortex and the sorium. And that explains when the training for a new behavior is stored in the cerebral cortex, it doesn't help really because there is no communication. So if we have the sorium on the throne, there is no communication. So all the student learned here is stored here, but there is no interaction. Therefore, it's much better to change the situation with additional safety than with a lot of training. Yeah, that means that the dogma of the proposition of the Enlightenment, cogito ergo sum, has today to be challenged. Especially when we deal with individuals with psychological trauma or with stress or if they are under pressure. These are the pictures of those objects, and they are in a case. In this case, there are more objects to learn more how you can deal with traumatized students. Trauma in history. When we have a look at history, then we learn that trauma is recognized, the psychological trauma is recognized in almost every period of history, but it is a taboo. And I think it's still a taboo. We don't like to talk about trauma, about psychological trauma, because it's a very difficult topic. Let's have a look at the First World War. First World War was the first war who was a war in an industrial way. So we had a lot of people in very difficult circumstances. They were in the trenches in France, for instance. They never knew if they will be killed within the next few minutes. Sometimes they were they got bombs from the own artillery, so it was a very, very insecure situation. And many of them, they were traumatized. That the name of this disorder was war neurosis, so the name was different. They were shell shock victims. That means they shivered as much that they couldn't have any guns in their hands anymore, or they were paralyzed without any physical cause. So they were led into hospitals, especially English people, English soldiers were they were in hospitals, and the officers in general, they were very interested to find out what can we do to have them back in the trenches again. So there are quite a lot of films on YouTube. They show you how they dealt with these persons. This is a part of a film, a shot of a film. The psychiatrist is entering the room and cries, "Bomb!" And at that moment, the soldier, the patient who was lying on the bed, is running under the bed. You can see here the head of this soldier. At that moment, he is back in the trench. He's not anymore in the safe hospital, but he is back. And very often we have students, because their amygdala is touched by a fragment, like in this case it was the word bomb fragment, that they are back at the place where they lived their trauma, like this soldier here. Even in a safe place, the school hopefully, is a safe place, and it can occur that even in a safe place we have this mechanism. But after First World War, everything was forgotten again, and it was tabooed once again. Second World War was the same. They knew quite a lot about it. They tried to deal with it in another way, and War of Vietnam, Iraq War. So nowadays we really know a lot of about trauma, and I think it's time to to put this knowledge into the schools too, but in a positive way, of course. Yeah, how common are traumatized students? Unfortunately, they are very common. We have to I think, yeah, there is in every class we might have traumatized students. That means students, they have quite often their saurians on the throne. If we work in an inclusive system, integrative system, this number is even higher. That's why we can say that children and young people who have very exceptional and disturbing behavior could be suffering from psychological trauma. The best against the psychological trauma is a secure attachment. Nothing can protect us in a better way than secure attachment. When we have dealings with children and young people who show signs of a trauma disorder, there is often a history of insecure attachment behind. Nowadays, we think that an insecure attachment is the first trauma a child can suffer of. There are different types of insecure attachment. There is the avoidant and ambivalent attachment, or the disorganized attachment and insecure attachment. But every child has a kind of attachment, otherwise it wouldn't have survived. A secure attachment can only be developed with a person who gives appropriate and sensitive response. And it is developed during pregnancy and especially during the first years of childhood. Of course, we can repair it afterwards, but it is very difficult. Sensitiveness means that the adult responds with a fast and appropriate response to the child's needs and actions. There were many attempts to avoid a secure attachment in history. This is a book written by Johanna Haarer. She was a Nazi woman. She wrote this book, Die deutsche Mutter und ihr erstes Kind, the German mother and her first child, in 1934. And she explains how we have to deal with children. For instance, 24 hours after birth, the child is not in contact with the mother. She told mothers and everybody that it is important that the mother can sleep and can take rest. Then she tells everybody that a child should be fed only every 8 hours, 3 times a day. That there is no direct eye contact with the child when it is fed. So there are a lot of things that avoid secure attachment. And I think the Nazis had a big interest to avoid a secure attachment. Because if you have a secure attachment, you have a lot of safety with you. You feel safe. I think you need less safety from the state, from the government. So you're much better protected. And if we have governments nowadays which rules for a long time and in a difficult way, like in different countries we have, they always have an interest to destroy the secure attachment of their people, because they can be ruled in a more easy way. So dictatorships, they try to avoid a secure attachment because people need more security from the government and more easily accept the rigidity of totalitarianism. And if we have refugees, I think it's important to think about. There is even the question if the modern economy is not interested in customers with no secure attachment. They consume more. Because when you don't have a secure attachment, you feel that something is, you miss something. And very often you try to get it, perhaps with food or with shoes or with something else to fill up. But you can't fill up this way around, but you consume a lot. Yeah, there are acute psychological traumas, and there is a poor memory in the moment of this acute psychological trauma. It's avoidance. We try that our amygdala doesn't get in contact with any fragments, with any trigger situations. Alertness. Our amygdala is checking all over, is checking, so we can't concentrate. There are unexpected flashbacks. That is very difficult. We are in a situation and there are flashbacks we don't know before. So it is very difficult. It's good to know that these are absolutely normal reactions of an insane situation. And they should fade. They should fade after some time, but when the trauma gets chronic, they can persist. Possible causes. As professionals working with children, we are confronted with both current and recent psychological trauma. Many of them are clear. The causes: illness and death in the family, accident, natural disaster. Natural disaster is much easier to cope with than human-made disasters. Divorce, separation, loss, war, loss of parental employment. There are other factors which can have an impact on a child's mental health, but these are often taboos we don't know about. Very often we don't know about neglect, especially not neglect in early childhood. Bullying is a main topic at schools. I think it's very important to avoid bullying because it can have a big issue. Sexual abuse, violence, especially in their own family, so domestic violence is a big taboo. Traumatic experience caused by bullying, a frequent issue in educational organizations, is often directly linked to the school environment. That is an acute trauma. And therefore, bullying should not be underestimated as a cause of trauma. This is here is put together all the causes of acute trauma and persistent trauma. It's the same. It's only a question of time. What we have is neglect in early childhood. As teachers, we have the children after this period of life, so it is always before. For other professionals, it could be an acute trauma too, but yeah, not for teachers. This is a big issue. Neglect in early childhood, it's a taboo. It is not really evident, but it can extremely harm to the soul of a child. Yeah, indication of a persistent psychological trauma. Some examples. Here we have a boy, he doesn't wear clothes which are appropriate for the temperature. It's summer, and he has a sweater which is too thick. Mostly have it the other way around. It's cold outside and they have short sleeves. It could be, it is not for sure, but it could be that they don't feel anything anymore. Violence and psychological trauma is very often linked. And then the body stops feeling violence, for instance. That means they don't feel if it is cold, if it is warm, and very often they don't have appropriate clothes. Age inappropriate behavior. That's very often. This situation was with a 15-year-old boy. He came in the classroom, in the middle of the classroom, and he had his jacket over him. It was like a little boy. When I don't see you, you don't see me. And now, for a 15-year-old boy, it could be a big shame. So you have to be very careful with situations like that, because behind there is a very sad story. Strange behavior. This was a young woman wearing always her handbag, even during gymnastic lessons. And it turned out that her parents were refugees from Turkey, so they were Kurdish and they were Christians. So it's a big story of flight, of violence, of difficult things. It turned out that it is like a symbol for a flight. She is always prepared for a flight. She's born in Switzerland, in a safe country, but nevertheless, there are transgenerational influences. So it can happen with children. They are not victims, that they show symptoms of victims. This was a very difficult situation at school. We had a new student coming and he didn't want to step on the floor in the gymnastic hall. And we tried everything. And then it took us 2 hours to understand it doesn't work like that. There must be a reason, a good reason, that he didn't want to step on the floor. And at the end it was easy to find a solution, because when a child doesn't want to do that in such clear way, then there must be always a good reason behind. They don't do it to make our lives as teachers more difficult. They have always a good reason to do that. Wearing shoes, no problem at all. violence against oneself. You see, there are cuts, but violence against oneself can be in a more hidden way. For instance, we have students, they fight or they provoke. So, at the end, they are the victims. They are beaten by other students, but they don't do it because they are perhaps aggressive, but they want to be violated. So it's violence against oneself, but in a very hidden way. Violence against oneself can be that they do harm to their fingers. So it is always a kind of a proof that they are still alive. So they feel with the aches that they are still alive. Poor memory. Children with difficult memories, they have to forget them. And very often it's difficult to make the difference between important things and these difficult memories. That means they delete, like in a computer, they delete everything. So they come to school, they have to start again and again every day because they have forgotten what they learned before. That can be very, very difficult. It is not a question of intelligence, but it is a question of trauma. That was a student I didn't know anymore how to deal with. And then, luckily, we always have the experts with us because these students, they are experts of themselves. At that moment, I asked them, what would you need that it is better? And very often they give me a really good answer. He said, oh, you have to write a note and put it on the bag. And apparently a bag at home was not enough to remind him that school exists and that he should have done homework. But with this note, it was much better. Very often we have children, they assume positions of adults. It can happen at school, but very often it happens at home. It is so-called parentism. That means that children, they step into the position of the parents. And we have to be very careful if we need translations. It is a kind of abuse if children have to translate for their parents because it changes the positions. If they come from abroad and perhaps the parents, they don't speak English, but the children, they speak English quite well. Nevertheless, we don't have to translate it for the parents because it gets visible that the positions are not on the right position. That means we really need professionals to translate. And imagine if a child has to translate something bad about himself, herself, it is extremely difficult. And I think it's very important to avoid situations like that. We really need professionals translating if there are problems and in contact with parents. Very important. Lost in space and time. Students, they don't feel their personality because of trauma. They can't feel where they are in space and in time. That can cause real difficulties in maths, in different subjects at school. And again, it is not a question of not being intelligent enough. It is trauma. Trauma can have different outcomes. Yeah, even geometry, math, there is an impact. freeze. Freeze is one of these three methods to cope with a difficult situation. When children are in a fight state, we realize, of course, if they are going away, flight, we don't see them anymore, so it's obvious too. But if they are in the freeze, very often we are not aware of it. But it is a very difficult situation. It is acute trauma, and we have to be very, very careful, and we have to pay attention to this state too. Best is to bring them back to reality, because they are at that situation, they are like this man on the bed in the hospital. They are back in their traumatic, in their situation where they were traumatized. There are different methods to bring them back. Sometimes we can call them by their names. Touching can be difficult, but if they see us when we touch them, it's much better than if we do it from behind. So I think you have a good instinct what you could do. Or you can let fall something, can help too. So, summary. Traumatized children confront us as teachers, therapists, or social workers with their trauma, whether we like it or not. Children with psychological trauma reenact their stories in their daily life, including school. They transfer their experience of traumatic attachment. Transferences. If you have a look at this wonderful picture, you see that there is something between the father and the child. So there are something you can't see but you feel. If ever people are meeting other people, there are things between, and so-called transferences. It's important at school that we avoid a lot of transferences, because it can have a real impact and a dynamic which is difficult to control. If you sit against somebody face to face, shoulder to shoulder, there are more transferences than if you sit like here. So I recommend to do it. Pay attention if somebody comes and you stand under the door with him, that always you have the possibility to see, to look not against his shoulders. It's much better to avoid transferences. Best is to go for a walk with somebody if you want to convince him. Walk with him, it's very good. It's easy to find good solutions. Yeah, a person with a trauma, he has to reenact again and again his situation. He hopes that one day he will find a good end, an exit, and then he can forget it, store it, and that it is over. He doesn't do it by purpose. He has to do it in a way. And very often, such traumas are linked to persons. So persons are involved. That means reenacting this trauma, they need other persons as actors. How do we find actors? It is like a carpet. So it is a red carpet, and this is the invitation for other people. Please step on this carpet, play. You have to act, to role in my play. Yeah, and on this red carpet, it is like glue. So if somebody it acts in the role, so they stay here, they can't escape anymore. So the roles, they are quite simple. We have especially the role of the persecutor, the role of the victim, and sometimes the role of the rescuer. But as typical, we are outside of ourself. Ourself, that is the position where we have a good access to our skills, to our knowledge, to everything. Here, we don't have access anymore. We only see one solution, perhaps not the best one. Here we have a lot of solutions. An example, perhaps you walk through the classroom, you see a student, he has a very bad writing. So you say to him, "Oh, your writing is not very nice." And then he explodes. He says ugly words, and you feel like a victim. You say, "Hey, stop, don't talk to me like that." And then you are on the carpet, and it might have a big issue for everybody. You feel that he persecutes you, and you feel at the same time like a victim. He feels persecuted, he feels like a victim, and we have a difficult situation, a little bit like the traumatic experience he had. So it is re-traumatization. It is even deeper this time, and it gets, with every time, it gets deeper and deeper. But we should have um, a better solution. We should have a happy end, find an exit. And there is a very easy sentence. It is the sentence you can think or tell them. You must have a good reason that. Don't ask why. You must have a good reason that you think, or that you act like that. That is a different position of view, and it helps that we have got an exit, that we don't turn in this trauma, but that we leave it. Of course, these situations happen so many times. It is not enough to find once a way out. So we have to train it again and again. Yeah, this is the carpet, the invitation to take a role in the trauma, the glue. And this is the concept of the good reason. You will see the sentence afterwards. This is the wood. And that is the explanation of the positions of rescuer, victim, and persecutor. All these positions can be linked to the biography of the teacher too. Of course, there are teachers, they assume more easily the role of a rescuer or of a persecutor. But in general, these roles are not linked directly to our personality. It is a fact that we take over these positions because of the reenacting of the trauma of the student, for instance. Yeah, this is the best position here. here you have got a good access to your knowledge, to your skills, and if ever you lose this position, you can go back. You can understand, oh, I was in the role of the persecutor, and it's very important to realize it. Yeah, you have to go back in this best position, in the green position. This is the case about transferences, that we can explain it to teachers, to professionals, to social workers. And it is really a very powerful trap. It happens, it's quite normal that we take over different roles, that we assume different roles, but it's important to realize it. This is the concept of the good reason. You might have a good reason that you, in the moment, perhaps you can add good reason. This reason might not be good for us, but it is good for the other person. Yeah, and obviously in married school, they know about the importance of words. It's really important. So change your words, change your mindset. A safe place. A safe place only makes possible that the very efficient strategies to survive will be given up and alternative behaviors can be installed. That is, again, the main topic. If we don't want to have saurians on the throne, then we have to install more and more safety. And it's important to have in mind what safety could be for students and for myself. It can be that family life gives me a lot of safety, or the colleagues at school, or that I arrive on time, or that I rush in at the last minute. It can be very individual. Here, there are different points to fill in about what for you safety is, and for what for students safety could be, a feeling of safety. Yeah, the point of resilience, it's up to everybody, to all of our partners, but empowering the students, doing projects like Yes Tomorrow, that is a wonderful thing to empower resilience of our students. And of course, the dedicated work of all partners. That's a wonderful basement. There are a lot of good methods I have seen at different schools. For instance, this day of walking together. 1 month after new students came to school in Przemysl, they do a walk, a whole day, they walk, and there are so many possibilities to get in contact, to play games, to talk. It's a wonderful situation to get more safety at the school, especially for new students. Then with visualization, we have seen it at Marianne School, Web of Lies book. So they visualize the topic, wonderful method. Transparency is something which gives safety too. We can see teachers, and we can see that Mr. Morgan has found his individual solution. So it's very important that individual solutions are possible. Living effectiveness, that students can create something, because with trauma they lose the feeling that they are effective. They have to gain it back with things like that, handicraft. It's so important to do that. Cooking. Here, effectiveness again in physics lessons, minimizing the danger of bullying. Marriott School has the toilets like that, so it is an open space here. It can be checked, controlled, very good solution. The positive approach. It's much better to have a positive approach than to see what is missing. And obviously, they do it here. If children live with encouragement, they learn confidence. So it's important that we do what we want to have done. That it is directly linked. So we have to live what we want to have done by the students.